This talk is password cracking in AD, the fun part of compliance, given by Scooby. A few announcements before we start. We would like to thank our sponsors, especially a diamond sponsor, Adobe and Akiro, and our gold sponsors, Dropzone AI and Run Zero. It's their support, along with other sponsors, donors, volunteers, that make this even possible. These talks are being streamed live, and as a courtesy to our speaker and audience, we'd ask you to check to make sure your cell phones are set to silent. With that, let's get started, and please welcome Scooby.
Okay, today I will tell you a story about three groups. YOLO Corp, a company that follow compliance rules, but that do not have any security staff in the company. CoolSec, a company with security pros that understood that yes, compliant is important, but sometimes it's better to use your judgment. And finally, Evil Cats, who obviously do not care about security or do not need to be compliant, at all. My name is Mathieu Saulnier. I'm currently working at Spectre Ops as the product manager for the Bloodhound Community Edition product. And sometimes, after 20 years in this industry, I feel a little bit like this. While I was preparing this talk, and yes, that was back in 2023, I watched this webinar from the Black Hills security folks where they talked about the 10 things that they did the most often, or rather that worked the most often to breach their customers. And if we zoom a little bit, we can see that the number one methods, the one that worked the most often, was related to passwords. Their solution, very easy, longer passwords. So during this story, we will see just how much password length influence password strength and resistance to attacks. When we search on Google, everybody agrees that passwords are, in fact, the weakest link. So should we just get rid of them? I've worked for at least 2 corporations that went passwordless while I was working there. And it was very, very nice not to have to type any passwords to get into most of these systems that we had, maybe except your computer or your laptop in some cases. But there's a lot of reason why the company you are all working for today might not be able to go passwordless. So if that's your case, you're in luck. This presentation is for you. So now that we've set the table, let's meet the folks at YOLO Corp. And this was built, these image was built at the very beginning of image generation by AI, and it has evolved a lot, but I wanted to keep the original image because I kind of like them. Anyway, here is YOLO Corp. They all look super cool and carefree. It's very hard to imagine what could actually go wrong, right? Well, we'll see that soon enough. YOLO Corp is compliant to both PCI and GDPR. Now let's introduce the people or the folks rather, at CoolSec. Here we can already see that things are more serious. CoolSec is also compliant to both PCI and GDPR, but also they decided to follow the NIST recommendations. In this story, we will see just how the 3 of these standards are impacting passwords. And finally, meet Evil Cats. Here, it smells like trouble. I'm sure a lot of you here in this room have seen the KiwiCon poster that lists all of the things that hackers do not care about. Well, our friends at Evil Cats are exactly like that, but on top of that, they have the unpleasant and arrogant attitude so typical of cats. I should know, I got 2 cats now, and I even get some battle scars that the one in the first row can actually see to prove it. So our story begins when Evil Cat 1 is getting ready to perform one of the most common attack, the one that actually hits everything that has a login exposed to the internet. In fact, in less than 24 hours after putting a system online, it will get hit by a brute force attack. I personally saw a machine being targeted only 7 minutes after being put online. For those who might not know the difference between a brute force and a password spray, a brute force is when you take one username and you go through a long list of passwords. And a password spray kind of works in reverse, where you have a very targeted list of passwords and you pick one password and you try it against all of the username. It has several advantages. It's slightly less noisy, but now any good CM would detect that anyway. But the main advantage is you can control the speed at which you do you test the passwords, and there's less chance to actually lock the password out. The more advanced attackers that are targeting specific corporation will use targeted username and password when they do password spraying. They will use various tools to gather the valid username, such as public data breaches, links on your website, and some tooling. In our case here, Evil Cat 1 used a LinkedIn scraper. This is a method that is used a lot by our red teamer friends. The list of passwords is also targeted for each company that they will target. So for example, here they will use the name of the company, maybe the product they are building, cities where they have offices, and to sometimes sports teams that are very famous in those cities. So the first password that they try here is Kirk and YOLO Corp bang, and it doesn't work. And then they try Wharf and Summer 2025, bang, and they have a matching username and password. Now they're gonna target CoolSec. And the first one is Chewbarca and CoolSec1. The second one is Boba Fett and Welcome 123 bang, and they have a match. Of course, this is a very simplistic view. In a real attack, they would have gone with the same password against all of the username until they have a match. Now armed with a valid credentials for both organizations, Evil Cat 1 found an exposed RDP server. When he tries to connect to the RDP server of YOLO Corp, this is what they see. Yes. So by the sound I just heard, I think most of you here can already know what's going to happen to our little golden retrievers. When Evil Cat 1 target, whoop, I went a bit too fast, but when target CoolSec, the prompt is slightly different. They get prompted for a one-time password. It's also called multi-factor authentication, or MFA for short. So now they need to provide the password that changes every minute. According to Microsoft, MFA can reduce the risk of identity compromises by as much as 99.9% over password alone. Let me repeat that because it's pretty important. MFA can reduce the risk of identity compromises by as much as 99.9% over password alone. We'll let that sink in for a second while I subtly drink water. Okay, now, I know that MFA is not bulletproof. You don't need to come see me and say, hey, Matt, I can bypass MFA. Yeah, I know, it's possible. But it's still a lot better than not using it. And when I hear someone tell someone else, don't use MFA, it can be bypassed, my hair become grayer. So don't stop me to tell me that, because my hair are gray enough as they are. Let's continue our story. Because CoolSec has a great SIEM, they also get alerts. They get alerts for the password spraying, but that's the type of alerts that you get 100 times per day, so they probably didn't do much with that. It's more like informational. But then they get something more interesting. First successful connection from an unknown IP. Now, probably it's time to start kicking in your incident response. This is not an incident response talk, but if you're interested, I've got another talk about incident response and open source playbook that I recommend you check on my GitHub. And then Finally, they would get multiple failed MFA when evil cat 1 tries to guess the MFA password. And if you haven't started your incident response in the previous step, now you should really, really do it. We talked about a few compliance standards, and the first one was PCI. For the longest time, PCI recommendations for password were as follow. 7 characters. Yes, Randy, it's pretty funny. You need to change your password every 90 days, and you need to have some complexity, uppercase, lowercase, digits, and special characters. This is pretty much the face that I did when I read that. And I don't know if you're thinking the same thing that I was thinking, but anyone here wants to take a wild guess at how long it takes to crack a 7-character password? According to Google, it's 7 minutes, but seconds, minute, it's probably faster today than in 2023 when I made the search for that. But let's get back to PCI. This is what it was, but let's be honest. In 2022, they actually changed their recommendation. Anyone wants to tell me what's the new recommendation for password length now from PCI? Wow, lots of QSA in this room. Awesome. Yes, 12 characters, but they still require you to change your password every 90 days and have some complexity. Now let's check cracking table. And again, there's probably a newer version of this, but the important is not the actual number, it's more like the range that we're looking for here. So if we zoom in a little bit and we check at 12 characters, with the complexity requirement, we are at 3,000 years. Not bad, not bad, but this is without accounting for human predictability. Because passwords like welcome 123 bang or summer 2025 bang bang have 12 characters and they are cracked in matter of minutes, if not seconds, as somebody mentioned before. Enters GDPR. Here we're recommending, or they are recommending 8 characters. Avoid dictionary words. You should use passphrase instead of passwords, and same type of complexity of uppercase, lowercase, digits, and symbols. Now here there's one word that really attracted my attention, and it's the word avoid. Why are they using the word avoid? And if we start thinking about it, the answer is kind of easy. It's impossible to prove to an auditor that you do not have every single word as a password in your password database. In fact, the only way you could do that is probably give them all of your hashes for them to crack. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many companies, or any companies for that matter, that would actually just end off their hashes to an auditing company. And I'm really sorry if you work for one of the big 4, but that's the truth. And passphrase here is just when you stitch multiple words together to make a longer password. So we talked about that roughly, but yeah, 8 characters, it's between a few minutes to a few hours to crack. Now let's look at NIST 863B. Here they are very different from the other ones. We are asking for 15-character long passwords, never expire, and no complexity. Actually, NIST claims that password complexity is bad, and it entices humans to use very predictable endings, or just increment the digit at the end of your password every time you change your password, which is pretty interesting. When I heard about this, and I heard the never expire, I was like, wow, wow, wee, wah. I like, very nice. Like, how cool could it be to never have to change your password again for your corporate laptop? So I went on a mission to make this happen where I was working. If we're going back to our trusty crack table, 15 characters, as long as you have some uppercase, lowercase mixed, we're talking about millions of years to crack. I think now we're getting somewhere. Let's continue our story. And this is Evil Cat 2, the post-intrusion specialist. And we can see it's a shady character just by the way it looks at us. They are, so that's it. It got their paws on a backup file containing ntds.dit file. Those of you who might not be familiar, ntds.dit is the file that contains all of the password hashes in Active Directory. For cracking password, you would typically need two files. A password file, in our case here, ntds.dit, and a second file containing lots of words. We call that a word list or a dictionary. One of the most famous dictionary out there is the file called rocku.txt, which is very easy to find with a Google search. Now it's time to crack the passwords that we have, and of course, Evil Cat will not go as low as use John the Ripper to crack. They really want Ash Cat. So let's break down the commands that we have here on screen. The M1000 is the type of passwords that we are targeting. 1000 means NTLM hash, which is normal because we are talking about ntds.dit. Then we have the hashes themselves, our dictionary, and finally TAC-R means that we are going to use rules. And sorry, I forgot about the A0. This is password attack. It is one of the two modes that use rules. The dive rule is a rule that is included with the AshCat bundle. It is a very efficient rule, but there's plenty of them, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But rules are ways that the words in the word list are mixed together. Suffix, prefix, stitch the word together, capitalize some letters, make some substitution. There's also the Prince mode that is pretty efficient. And Prince stands for Probability Infinite Chained Element. It was created to crack stronger hashes. Typically, when you crack passwords for the very first time in an organization, you might get as much as 50% of their password within 24 hours. And if you keep cracking for like a week, you might reach 80%. And I can guarantee you that in those numbers, there are some very interesting accounts that you will uncover. Now we're going to play a little game. I will show you two passwords, and you'll tell me which password is the strongest. So we'll start with our friends at YOLOcorp. So first password, welcome 2025, bang. Second password, password, bang. Who thinks the first password is the best? Nobody. Second password, 17 characters. Who thinks it's stronger than the first one? There's a lot of people who haven't raised their hand, so you didn't fall into the little trap. But yeah, officially, the first one is 3,000 years, and the second one would be 7 trillion years. But in fact, I think lots of you already knew that, but it's my Thai friends who are right. Same, but different. Both of these passwords are extremely common words. They use very common substitution and suffix. So there would both be cracked in minutes, if not seconds, because all of those patterns are already in all of the cracking tools out there. Now we're going to play the same game, but with CoolSec passwords. You don't need to count the characters. Both passwords have 23 characters. So just focus on the passwords themselves. The first one is backtick the empire's barks backtick. And the second one is patience young Padawan. So who thinks the first password is stronger? Okay, maybe like 1/3 of the room. Who thinks the second password is the strongest? Another third of the room, so I guess 1/3. Who thinks they're the same? No. Okay, some people don't want to play, but okay. So this is longer than our trusty crack table would show us, so we need to go to another tool. Here we're going to passwordmonster.com, And according to them, the first password would take 161 million years to crack, and the other one a mere 29 million years. But if we go to security.org that also have a cracking tool, they both get to 3 septendecillion years. But again, I think it's my Thai friends who are right. Same, but different, but still the same. Both passwords would take a lot longer than anyone can or will invest in cracking those passwords. So now it's time to see how Evil Cat 2 fared against the 2-password file that they got their paws on. Sorry, I did forget to click. So first one, not surprisingly, they got 80% of the password, but at CoolSec, roughly 1%. So we will see in the rest of the story what CoolSec did exactly to get such a good result. So first of all, they did something that not a lot of people do. I've seen that being done in some financial institution in the past, but maybe not to the extent that we're going to discuss here. And I actually was talking with one of our customers not long ago, and they're doing almost exactly what I'm going to present here. So I'm kind of very happy that this methodology is picking up in the real world as well, or in more organization now. So they went with the NIST recommendation of 15 characters, never change, or the password never expired. But here's the twist. They will crack their own password on a weekly basis, and a password crack equals a password change. So how do you actually do that in the real world? Because it's nice to say it, but let's see the steps to get there. So first of all, you need to create a service account. Then you're going to give the rights replicate directory change all to that account, and that will allow you to perform what is called a DC sync, so pulling all of the information from the domain controller to a non-domain controller machine. You need to create a GPO that will reflect what you want, 15-character password, no complexity, never expires. This is a key part. Inform your user of what is coming. If you just do that, people will be lost and they won't understand what you're doing. After that, you need to apply that GPO so it takes effect, and then you need to force change your passwords. Now, please, do not go to work Monday and do this. Again, inform your user, and don't do that in one go. Your help desk will hate you for the rest of your life, right? Go by wave, go by OU, be smart about this, but really consider doing that in your organization, just not Monday. Okay, now, we've set up our policy, our user have changed their user, now it's time to have some fun. So first of all, we're gonna use, okay, what I've seen in many corporations is the security team would ask the domain admins, hey, can I have the ntds.dit? And then the domain admin goes on the DC, pulls ntds, give it to security. When you do that on a weekly basis, maybe, just maybe, your domain admin will be a bit bored. So here's a tool that will help you get the password hash on your own and automate everything. So here's the tool. It's called DS Internals. It's a tool made by Michael Grafnetter. It's been around for a while. And funny story, when I created this deck the first time, Michael helped me and made sure that everything was right. And Michael was hired by SpecterOps 3 weeks ago. We went through the slide and he said, hey, I updated my tools. So this version of the deck actually has the latest and greatest version of DS Internals. Now, because I'm not a Windows person and even less of a PowerShell person, I remind everyone that is like me that you need to import the module if you want it to work. Otherwise, you'll just be wondering why it's not working. Very basic, but very important. Now we're going to create a variable called creds. And we're going to call the method called getCredential that will pop up a screen on our terminal and or GUI, and we can enter the username and password that we created in the previous step. Now that we've set up the tool, it's time to use it. So here we will use the method get AD replicate account, and we're gonna target one of our DC. We're gonna supply the credential that we capture in the previous step. We're gonna focus only on the accounts that are enabled because there's no point in wasting times on accounts that are disabled, and we're gonna format that in a file that Hashcat can actually read and use to crack. Now a cool little twist here, we're gonna run the same command a second time, but instead of formatting the output, we're gonna check password quality on them with all of the passwords that we cracked. Of course, the first week, you won't have any password that you've cracked, so you can skip this, but as you go, your list of cracked password will go bigger and bigger and bigger, and this will save time because you'll be able to remediate things a lot faster. Now it's again time for you to wake up and play a little game. I want to know how many here have only one account to rule them all. Nobody wants to admit it. It's okay. Who have two accounts? One user account and one, let's say, administrative accounts to administer servers. Quite a few. Okay, who here has three accounts? That would be one user, one admin, and one domain admin accounts that can only connect to domain controllers. So that is the preferred way, the way Microsoft wants to do it. If you want to go that route, I highly recommend using Bloodhound to make sure that what you intend to do is what is actually happening in your environment. Why I'm asking this is that one of the reasons why we have all of these users is that we do not want them to have the same password, right? If you're using the same password for your user and your domain admin account, if your user account gets compromised, they have the key to your domain admin account as well. So one thing that you should do is when you pull the hashes, make sure that there's no duplicate hash in your password files. If a same person is using the same hash, you should inform them, force them to change their passwords. If two different human beings have the same hash, well, there's one of two things. Either they have a password that is guessable, even if you didn't manage to crack it, or your process is broken. Maybe your help desk is resetting the same password every time or creating all of the new accounts with the same password, but there's something broken in your process. Let's continue. Now we've pulled the password. It's time to crack them. Yay! For those who've been following since the beginning, you might recognize the very first command. It is the same command that EvilCat2 used against the organization before. So if you remember when I did my intro, I said this one thing, I think I didn't say it actually, but I like to use adversary tools to make their life miserable, and this is the example. So the second line here, you see that it's almost the same as the first one. The only difference is the rules. So there are hundreds of rules around. I think that even NSA has published their Hashcat rules. So you can play with those rules and you can run as many rules as you want, one after the other, and you might get some very interesting results. Some rules might work better in your environment than in your peers' environment. It's really depending on your user base. The third command is the good old brute force, where we try every single character, we go from 1 and we just increase until you stop it. Once you're done cracking, or brute forcing in this case, it's time to copy the hashcat.put file, which contains all of the hashes that you've cracked so far, into the weak hash txt. The reason why we do this is because most of the time, you will not pull the passwords from the same machine that you will crack them. So you want to be able to use the weak password with the DS internal module to make sure that you don't have any cracked password already. Now there's one last step. We've found weak passwords, so we're going to now pull information about those users from our Active Directory. We will compile a list of people that we've changed their password, and we will force them to change their password again. And the reason why we keep a list is that if it's maybe like the third time in 3 weeks that you ask someone to change their password, maybe just forcing them a fourth time might not do the trick. So now it's time to educate your user on how to create strong password and not just increase the digit at the end. So you might be asking, Matt, that's pretty cool, but how do we actually create a strong password? In my opinion, there's two different scenarios. And yes, I'm a big Deadpool fan and I wanted to make sure that it's there at least once in my presentation. Scenario one, you never have to type your password. In this case, you should go as high as the portal that you're using allows. Otherwise, like an Active Directory, you can aim for 64 characters. You store that in a password manager, and you never have to type it again. You never have to remember it. It will just fill automatically when you need it. But if you need to type your password, so for your password manager, for example, or your laptop, then I would recommend something that I call dressing the password. So that gives you a password that looks a little bit like this. Pound, pound, dollar, dollar. I had a bad feeling about this. Dollar, dollar, pound, pound. This is a 37-character password that is very easy to type, very easy to remember, and kind of long to crack according to our website. So I have no idea what the septendecillion here actually is, but it does sound extremely long, and I'm not sure that even Deadpool would survive this. Yes, sorry, bro. Now, an additional tip. For those who have a very acute ear, you might have noticed that English is not my first language. So you can use your mother tongue to create your password. Here we have the famous Yoda's quote, "Fear leads to anger," but in French. So we have pound, dollar, la peur mène à la colère, dollar, pound. It would take roughly 900 tridecillion years to crack these passwords. And what's interesting about this is that, thank you. I already have some, is that neither the word men or colère are in the RAW-Q dictionary. And that brought me to ask myself a question. How many of those characters are actually in RAW-Q? Those characters are actually in RAW-Q. RAW-Q has over 14 million passwords. And out of them, 800 have this little C thing. 500 more or less, have the E there with the accent, which is super prevalent in French. So it's kind of I was very curious why it's less present than the C, but then I realized that the C is also used in Portuguese a lot, so that might explain why. The S with the reverse hat there, that is in the Slovak languages, is there roughly 65 times. The German ETZ, like the double S, is there about 70 times. And finally, the kind of reverse bang from the Spanish language is there only 90 times. And that's the one that surprised me the most. Like, typically you'd see the exclamation point is extremely popular. So I was thinking that Spanish people would use that symbol a lot more. So to give you an order of magnitude, we said that the one that has the most hit is the first one with 800. And to compare that with the letter A is present in 9.5 million passwords out of 14 million. So yeah, Matt, this is pretty cool, but we're in 2025. We're moving to the cloud. So what about Entra ID? Well, I'm glad you asked. In Entra ID, there's something called password protection. This is a list Microsoft is maintaining some words that they banned. Things like welcome, summer, winter, all of these, I said welcome, all of these very easy words. But Microsoft doesn't know anything about your specific corporation. So if people in your company are using your company name, you should put it in there. I talked about the sports team. So sometimes when you crack, you'll find like, I don't know, I'm from Montreal, so maybe like Montreal Canadian could be a very popular password where I'm from, so I could put that here. So the goal here is every time you crack a password and you see that a word is used over and over again, just stick it in there and your user won't be able to use it anymore. Okay, but we can get the hash ashes out of Entra ID, right? Ah, thanks, Donald. As a Canadian, I never thought I'd say that, and especially not this year. No, here you have a tool. We have a tool called AAD internals that was built by Nestori, aka Dr. Azure AD. And again, for those who have a very good sense of observation, you might be like, DS internal, AAD internals looks very similar. And you would be 100% right. Nestori named this tool after Michael's tool. Now I need to give you a little warning before we continue. If you are already pulling your ashes from Active Directory, do not use this method. This is more complicated. You're gonna get the exact same results anyway. You're just gonna make your life harder. So let's see what you actually need to pull information out of Active Directory, and Nestori will guide us through the steps that we need. So first of all, obviously, you need to have the ashes in your Entra ID. And then you will need credentials for an application that has the Windows legacy credential rights. As of today, there is only one application that we know have these rights, and it's the Azure AD Domain Services Sync, or AADSS. And finally, you will need the encryption certificate that lives on your Entra ID domain controllers, or controller. With those three things, you can now install module AAD internal. Do not forget to import the module if you want to use it. And then you can actually use the module and use get AAD int user NT-hash and provide the client password, the client ID, and as we mentioned, the encryption certificate that you've pulled from the Entra ID domain controller. Now we're already almost at the end of our story, but I want to give shout outs to the people who created the tools that were demonstrated in this talk. So first of all, of course, Michael Grafnitter with DS Internal, Dr. Azure AD for AAD internals, the awesome folks that created Ashcat, and they actually released a newer version just last Friday before Black Hat. But a special shout out to a guy named Obvious Malware that presented back in 2022 at the Red Siege Wednesday Offensive. And he's the one who kind of reminded me about the DS internals tool, and that really speed up all of our program. And finally, there was a talk at the Red Team Village from a guy named Travis Palmer. The talk was password cracking beyond 15 characters, under $500. Now I would like to leave you with one quote. Do you want to mitigate against auditor or attackers? And I think this kind of summarized this talk very well. If you blindly follow the recommendations of the different standards, it doesn't make you any more secure. On the other end, if you use them intelligently and you train your user properly, those same recommendations can actually help you increase your security posture. And as you saw, it can actually be quite fun to implement. So if you want to continue the conversation, I think we have times for question. This is the SpectreOps public Slack. I'm there all the time. I'm on Twitter at ScoobyMTL. This is my LinkedIn if you want to connect. Everything is open at least until the end of the week. Yes, question?
It's a great talk.
Thank you.
Welcome. Is it urban? I have a question to follow up. Is it urban myth or true that it is?
Is it urban myth or true that it is easier to crack a password when the user puts a bang at the end of it? And then the follow-up is if they insist on putting a bang on the end of their password, based on your slide, should we be encouraging them to use the Spanish bang instead?
If they have the Spanish, yeah. Well, I'll insert the last one first. If they have the Spanish keyboard installed, probably yes. I think, I'm not an expert on that, but I think that the bang at the end of the password don't change anything. It just makes you compliant to the password policy, because this is the first thing that any cracking tool will actually try. We'll just add that symbol at the end, right? So, and it also, most of the passwords that are common, so on the English keyboard, will be tried anyway. So that's why I recommend putting at least 2 characters at the beginning and at the end, and not just 1 character at the end. Any other questions? Guy with the hat there.
I have a strong voice, so I can ask my question first. Tu penses quoi des solutions passwordless, comme par exemple pour Microsoft? I can ask in English. What do you think about the passwordless solution like Microsoft who want to push it down?
So the question was, what do I think about the passwordless solutions? I think I brushed that at the beginning, like in the introduction, but I really encourage everyone who can go passwordless to actually go passwordless. It makes your life a lot easier. It's hard to crack a password when there's no password. Yes.
So for the Enter ID password prevention list, do you recommend just dumping like the RockU text in there, or like, I mean, what's the practical limits there, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do not recommend dumping the whole RockU there. And in RockU, there's a lot of lines that are broken if you look at it. So you can kind of clean it up. But no, there's a lot of passwords there that have little utility. But I think that if you crack your password regularly, you'll see what your user are using. It's going to be obvious which words you need to add to that list. And remember that Microsoft is maintaining their own list, so there's already a large amount. But I think it's especially useful if you have non-English speakers, like if you have offices somewhere else than the US, Canada, an English-speaking country. You might find words in other languages that make their way in your password very, very often as well. I think there was one more question there from someone I think I know.
That was an excellent talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ren.
On the never expiring password, I think that just makes everybody who's ever administered passwords just super nervous at the core of their being. Is there still some risk that you think? And what I'm thinking of is like, not that people have crackable passwords, but they reuse their passwords across multiple sites. And quite often those passwords get dumped from some other site. So is there value still in rotating passwords even like every 90 days?
I wouldn't, I don't think every 90 days. If you, most of the time when I've seen this implemented, the thing that was preventing people from going to never expire was compliance and some auditor that did not really understood the countermeasure in place. And that's why I also recommend to crack your own password, but that's not what you're asking. If I really had to change the password, I think I would go for at least 1 year so that people can use their password for a year and then select a real good passwords and not just increment the digit at the end or just change something trivial. Like they really have like they don't have a year to think about it, but you know what I mean? Like they know that they're going to be stuck with that password for a year. So it's kind of worth investing sometimes to create a new and good password.
That seems like a good balance. And then follow up, would you consume lists of leaked passwords, like the big dump sets, and do you use that also to check your password?
Yes. Yeah, if you want to go like a little bit, you can, the point here of the talk is also to have fun doing that. So changing your password dictionary is a great way to do that. Like mix and have fun. 1 week you can crack with the RockU, another week with something else. If there's a new leak, yes, totally, 100%. So another question here in front.
So when it comes to the compliance part, though, are you using the weekly crack that you do as a compensating control to get around the 90-day requirement, right? Because you're going to have to prove out that you're doing something else.
Yes, exactly. So cracking the password, you'll see that some password will change over time. But then if it's uncrackable, and it's always the balance between who's auditing you, right? And then you need to convince them. But once they're convinced and when you show them that you really have strong compensating measure, typically it works. But yeah, there's some people that are more stubborn than other. And I say people and not even companies, right? So sometimes it's really like the person that they sent you this time that won't accept it. But if it was accepted the year before, typically you have ground to keep it. Like I've never seen a company having to revert back once it was accepted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you think about the challenge of, let's say, companies where there's the whole right usability versus security. So if they have to use passwords still, how do you convince a company to increase to a password length that the typical user is not going to want to quit their job and pull their hair out every time they type a password in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the advantages of not having to change their password all the time makes a lot of people very happy to to have a longer password. Especially if you take the time to give example of passwords or tips on how to create longer passwords, because it can be easy to create a long password that is easy to remember. So I think that if you just go to 15 characters or 16 characters or whatever, and you force them to change their password every 90 days, there will be lots of users won't be happy. But I think that the fact that they don't need to change the game altogether. And it's a nice way, just kind of to Randy's point, it's a nice time to remind them to not use the same password everywhere and that they should use strong password manager as well. This works very well in companies where the company is providing a free password manager to their employees.
One more question. Is there any particular easy to implement solution for implementing password block list that spans not just obviously Windows, Azure, or something, but that would easily span other applications and make it manageable?
I know there's a solution for Active Directory, but lots of people don't. You need to put like a DLL in your domain controller that will look at the passwords that are typed and block them if they have a list that you maintain. So it's kind of the same functionality, but for domain controller. There's an open source version and there's a commercial version of that tool that works for Active Directory. I don't know if you have something that works for like everything, or if you have SSO solutions that are different. I'm not familiar with that. Any other question? Well, thank you very much. I hope that you improved. Thank you.